all attending the RTA's meeting today. Members who are here. Those polling. With that announced that
Director Sager, Chairman Dillard.
Here.
11 present, 5 absent, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Before we get started, I want to congratulate Director David Andolcio. You're over there, David, on your company being awarded the 2022 Chicago United Impact Award, which goes to impactful minority business enterprises working towards inclusion and economic parity within their organizations. So congratulations, David. We appreciate what your company does and for all of your input, not only on those issues, but for all of them here at the RTA. But congratulations. That's a great award. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes from the board meeting held on November 17th of 2022. Any comments or corrections to those minutes which have been sent to you? If not, how about a motion and a second to approve? Director Pang moves we approve, seconded by Director Gorman. Mr. Secretary, why don't you take the roll, please?
Director Andolcio.
Aye.
Director Canty. Director Carey.
Aye.
Director Colson.
Aye.
Director Fuentes.
Aye.
Director Gavin.
Aye.
Director Gorman. Director Holt.
Aye.
Director Kotel.
Aye.
Director Pang.
Yes.
Director Ross.
Aye.
Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
11 ayes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and that is so approved. Item 4 is the public comments segment of the meeting. Any comments received will now be read into the record by the board secretary. What's our written response?
Mr. Chairman, we have a number of written comments submitted. Those are attached to your packet and posted on the agenda. We also have a number of individuals present wanting to speak.
Okay, so let's move on if you think it's the proper procedure, Mr. Secretary, to take the folks that are present here.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I believe Bruce Mainzer is present, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Welcome, Mr. Mainzer.
Thank you for this opportunity to comment on today's board meeting. I am a former transit executive who worked for the RTA, IDOT, and MTA in New York. I have a transportation planning degree from Northwestern, and I am vice chair of the Chicago Metro chapter of the Climate Reality Project. In today's board meeting, the RTA board will be asked to approve the 5-year capital plans of the service boards. I'm here to discuss Climate Reality Chicago chapter's extreme disappointment with CTA's lack of progress in electrifying its bus fleet. CTA is continuing to order diesel buses and is proposing another 500 diesel buses with funds programmed to purchase these buses for each of the 5 years of this plan. Over the past few years, Climate Reality has urged the PACE and CTA boards to electrify their bus fleets. Climate Reality appreciates the PACE Board's turnaround on electrification. PACE's FY23 five-year capital plan contrasts sharply with the PACE's first draft of the Driving Innovation Strategic Plan in May of 21, which stated that they would not be purchasing any electric buses in the short term and instead follow the CTA's lead. It's fortunate they did not follow CTA's lead, and instead the PACE Board carefully considered our frequent public statements at their board meetings, and PACE has now fully adopted electric buses, and they will be receiving 20 buses next year and have adopted a 2040 deadline for a 100% zero-emission operating fleet. I wrote an op-ed on CTA failing to make enough progress in bus electrification for the Chicago Tribune that was published on November 14th. I will not repeat all the statistics on the hundreds of millions of dollars and hundreds of electric buses requested and awarded to each of the other transit systems in the U.S. Since that op-ed, Boston's MBTA five-year capital plan has been developed that has twice the capital dollars programmed in electrification than the CTA. And MBTA's bus fleet is 40% smaller than CTA's. MBTA is investing $552 million in garages and electric bus vehicles, while CTA is only investing $271 million in total bus electrification in this five-year plan. PACE is spending almost as much as CTA for electrification in this five-year plan, an impressive $250 million over the next 5 years to purchase electric buses and electrify 2 garages. Amazingly, PACE is spending more on electrifying its garages in its five-year plan than CTA, and yet CTA claims that they have the greatest need for garage retrofits because of the age of their facilities. New York, Boston, and Los Angeles five-year capital plans contrast sharply with CTA's plan. New York's MTA capital plan speaks of the suffering and flooding caused by Hurricane Sandy and other storms that wreaked havoc on the New York transit system, and that is the driver for decarbonizing New York's transit bus fleet. New York's MTA understands the urgency of the climate crisis and recognizes that even though the very nature of transit operations is critical to fighting climate change by reducing automobile usage, bus electrification will reduce even further greenhouse gas emissions because fossil fuel buses are a significant source of greenhouse gases. New York will be spending $1 billion in their five-year plan to fully electrify 2 old garages and buy over 500 new electric buses. The Charging Forward electrification plan issued by CTA last February is not competitive with other transit agency plans to suitably take advantage of the availability of FTA funds to ramp up bus electrification now. CTA still has not started the engineering design for the 77th Street garage, its oldest bus garage, and so CTA has not submitted any scope or request for funding. The Charging Forward document proposes a new garage somewhere on the south or west side, but there won't be plans to submit for funding until 2027. Funds for this garage should be requested now so that CTA would have a brand new facility to not only receive new e-buses in the near term, but also allow staging of buses at other garages so other garage retrofits can proceed faster. If CTA is not able to retrofit its garages fast enough, there are garage locations where CTA can store these e-buses outside and provide adequate charging facilities. Some transit systems are able to use on-route chargers on some routes to minimize the need to fully electrify all electric buses. There are lots of means to avoid further fossil fuel bus purchases if only CTA has the desire to examine all possible means to make real progress in bus electrification. These 500 new diesel buses will commit CTA to be a major greenhouse gas emitter throughout the decade of the 2030s, causing 45,000 metric tons of annual carbon dioxide emissions for the next 14 years of this fleet of 500 buses, the equivalent of the emissions of 15,000 cars annually. In addition, these 500 buses are also a financial mistake, as CTA will spend an additional $15 to $20 million in additional fuel and operating costs each year compared to operating 500 electric buses. CTA's bus fleet currently causes 3% of all greenhouse gases emitted by on-road vehicles within the city of Chicago, according to Climate Reality Chicago chapter's estimates. Ordering 500 diesel buses will commit CTA to continuing to contribute to the climate crisis well after other transit systems have successfully transitioned to electric service. I'm requesting that the RTA not approve the 500 diesel buses in this 5-year plan, and instead ask that the RTA board request that CTA come up with a more aggressive timetable for retrofitting its garages, building a new garage, and ramp up electric bus purchases instead of continuing to order fossil fuel buses. The capital money is available now for CTA. All CTA needs now is the will and commitment to make use of this funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Bruce, very much. And we heard you, those of us who were at our public hearing last week, appreciate your testimony there as well. Thank you. Jeremy, Mr. Secretary, is Kim Stone next?
I believe Kim Stone is here virtually, Mr. Chair.
Ah, excellent.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
Kim.
so much for letting me be virtual today and for the opportunity to comment on the strategic plan and budget. I'm a council member in Highland Park, and I'm the co-chair of Climate Reality Project Chicago Metro Chapter's Task Force on Transit Electrification. I was unable to participate in the public hearing last week because there was a large internet outage in my area and I couldn't sign in. So I appreciate being here today. The draft strategic plan addresses many of the problems with our region's public transit systems. It is clear that the Chicago region needs to update its funding model for public transit, and I appreciate the work that has gone into evaluating different options and presenting ideas to help fully fund the region's public transit. Transit-oriented development and active transportation are addressed in the plan, as is the overall benefit of public transportation in reducing emissions. Since 2018, I have been advocating for a transition to a zero-emission bus fleet at pace, and I'm pleased that they are moving in that direction. In contrast, as Bruce described fully, the CTA began testing electric buses in 2014, but has made little progress to fully electrify, and now proposes to purchase hundreds of new diesel buses. This is not acceptable. I urge you to reject the 500 new diesel buses in the CTA budget and 5-year plan that you're voting on today, and to send it back for a revision. RTA can and should help facilitate the transition to electric bus fleets by CTA and PACE. Electric buses reduce air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions and will also save money for our transit agencies. With RTA's help, the Chicago region can obtain grant funding, implement shared charging where appropriate, and more quickly transition to a zero-emission fleet. Now is the time, not only because of the urgency of climate action, but because there is an unusually large amount of federal money available for electrifying buses in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. We cannot wait for 2040 for our buses to be fully electric. In the strategic plan, I have a serious concern with the use of the term near zero in action item 5. From reading the plan and hearing what CTA and PACE have said, I believe our goal is the same, to move closer to a zero-emission fleet in the 5-year timeframe of the plan. This is clearly stated on page 6, which says reduce the footprint of the transit system and move towards zero emissions for transit operations. This is different than near zero, which is a specific term that generally refers to natural gas-powered vehicles rather than electric. Please remove this term, which appears on pages 51 and 62 of the draft. As the electric grid gets cleaner, the emissions of electric vehicles decline. Zero-emission vehicles are different than near-zero vehicles, and we are beyond the point of being able to use natural gas or other so-called near-zero vehicles as bridge fuels. Climate change must be addressed immediately, and electric buses are available now. I challenge the RTA to bring the Chicago region's public transit up to the level of other large cities around the world, both efficient and fossil fuel free. Thank you all for your service to the region and for allowing me to comment today.
Thank you very much, Stone. We really appreciate it. Dr. Ullman next.
I believe Dr. Ehrman was going to be here virtually. I'm not sure he is, though. You can check. Doesn't appear
Ehrman,
to be.
you around?
Yeah.
If not, thank you. And thank you, both Bruce and Kim, for your testimony today. Item 5 is the Executive Director's Report. Leanne?
Good morning, everybody. We do have a rather meaty agenda today, so I will just dive right in and give you just a very brief report and update. We've had a pretty busy month since we last met, so I will just kind of give you a quick snapshot of some of the things that have been happening. So next slide, please. As I mentioned, it's been an extraordinarily busy month since our last meeting. We completed presentations on the budget and the strategic plan in all 6 counties across the region. We released the draft strategic plan, Transit is the Answer, for public comment. I participated in a panel at City Club last week. And we held a virtual public hearing for this year's budget as well as for the strategic plan too. And sincere thanks to those of you who were able to join us for some and all of those events. Your support and participation is very much greatly appreciated. I hope that you may have seen some of the media coverage that we garnered from the plan's release. We did really get, I think, some very thorough reporting on the key issues from within the plan. And I think there was also some articles that sort of raised the pertinent questions that we as a region need to continue to address with the media and the public going forward. So you'll be hearing more from us on that. And as I think we've said a few times, like the plan is really just the beginning. There's a lot more work to do going forward. Look for our regional transit newsletter that'll come out tomorrow, which is going to include a summary and links to all that coverage, as well as the City Club Transit panel. So if you didn't get a chance to see it, I encourage you just to check that out, perhaps. And a few other important dates for finalizing the plan. As I said, it's out for public comment. The public comment closes January 9th. And then staff will work to finalize that plan and then bring it back to you for the final discussion at our February meeting, February 16. And we'll be looking for your approval of that plan at that point. So next slide, please. This fall, the RTA, in partnership, as we do each year with CMAP, did an annual call for community planning projects. There were 64 applications received in total from 55 different applicants across the region, 11 of which had a transit focus. So they're the ones that we review and look at and consider for projects. They are include a wide variety of things from special financing district work to implement some TOD plans around municipalities, supporting some developer dialogues, TOD zoning code updates, planning assistance to implement neighborhood mobility hubs, and some transit corridor studies. So both the RTA and CMAP this year targeted what we're deeming sort of high need communities as sort of the priority. We'll fund others, but that's the priority area initially. We received 4 transit focused applications that meet that criteria. And we will continue to review all the applications. We're in the process of interviewing the actual applicants. We're getting feedback from each of the service boards as they, in many cases, interrelate with their locations, their activities, their sites. And we'll also be continuing to talk to partners across the region as we finalize that review. We'll hold public comment from January 17 through February 3, and then making the final announcements at our, the final selections, I should say, of those projects at our February board meeting. So next slide, please. Just a quick snapshot of today's agenda. First, we're going to hear from Jackie Forbes, who is the Chief of Planning and Programming from Kane County, but also serves as our Chair of our Citizens Advisory Board. She'll give you an update on that, their activities. Then we'll have presentations looking at the progress on the capital program development efforts from our project management oversight team. There'll be a report on the monthly financials as well as an update on the strategic plan. Our final presentation will be from Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, CMAP. Laura Wilkinson is here to run through the process and timeline to complete a plan for action for regional transit. This is work that's in response to a law passed last year requiring CMAP to complete a report to the to create legislative recommendations, I should say, in focus areas that include financial viability, among other things. The law states that the report must consider the recommendations and the principles from our strategic plan, and Laura is just going to give you an update on the work that, and their plan and their process for that work for the better part of next year. Then we'll have a couple of items, several items for your actual action, including an amendment to the capital program, approval of the regional budget, 3 contracts, and an appointment of an RTA pension trustee. And then finally, we're going to take a moment to recognize Director Carey, who is on her way. Oh, not Carey. Sorry, Canty. Sorry, Director Carey. She's like, what's happening? Canty, 2 people sitting side by side with similar. Sorry, my bad. Apologies for that. Today is her final meeting as she's going to be taking office as the state rep for the 54th district. So that's the agenda. With that, I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, but happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you. Any questions for the executive director? If not, you did a very nice job at the City Club's transit panel the other day, and it was excellent. So thank you.
Thank you.
Just one point before we get off Leanne's agenda. Bruce Mainzer brought it up, but on greenhouse gas emissions and electrification of buses, obviously, to the public, we've had lots of discussions. We had Dorval Carter here himself talking about bus electrifications. But the bottom line is, no matter how much we're electrified or not on buses, Bruce pointed out that 3% of the greenhouse gases come from transit in Chicago, but we're moving 1 million or so folks a day, even greater numbers pre-pandemic. And the best solution for the environment is to get on mass transit. Regardless of what the percentage of bus electrification is, even today, we're clearly the best environmental solution for all of northeastern Illinois. And just want to point out that we're moving 1 million folks a day, and we are very little of the greenhouse gas emissions. And I think about that every time I see thousands of red lights leaving the city or coming into the city on the Eisenhower, Kennedy, Stevenson, et cetera. So ride mass transit if you care about the environment. And there's a lot of other reasons to ride us, but the environment is one. Item 6A is an update on the activities of the RTA Transit Citizens Advisory Board. Jackie Forbes, welcome. Come on down, as Bob Barker would say at The Price is Right.
Good morning, Chairman Dillard and members of the Board of Directors. Thank you for your time this morning. My name is Jackie Forbes, and I am the chairperson of the RTA Citizens Advisory Board. I'm here to provide an update of the activities of the board. The RTA CAB last met on October 24th, 2022. During this meeting, RTA staff provided a preview of the draft regional transit strategic plan, provided an overview of the 2023 regional transit budget, and provided a summary of RTA's Local Planning 2021 Implementation Report, which features progress made thanks to the agency's community planning and access to transit programs. Several RTA CAB members expressed support and enthusiasm for the goals and actions of the draft strategic plan and 2023 budget. Feedback on specific points included: members expressed support for eliminating the fare box recovery ratio requirement to allow agencies to focus more on making the system more equitable and accessible to all. One member expressed concerns about raising the sales tax given its regressive nature and called for the agency to explore more progressive revenue options like property taxes. Another member commented on Illinois' current high property tax rate and worried additional taxes could be a burden on homeowners. They proposed tolling on highways, which is an option that's considered in the plan. Speaking personally and on behalf of my fellow members of the RTA CAB, I'd like to express my support and excitement for the Regional Strategic Plan and 2023 budget. As part of the Infrastructure Investment Working Group, I appreciated the opportunity to participate deeply in the process to develop the plan and as a regional stakeholder and chair of the CAB. As we all know, transit is facing many challenges, but I'm confident our system can continue to grow and improve with the plan as a guide. The next meeting of the RTA-CAB will be held at 10 a.m. on January 23rd. And this concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Jackie, and thanks for your advocacy and input from the multiple fronts you delivered on. Any questions of Ms. Forbes? If not, thank you very much, as always. Really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Next is 6B, and that's a presentation of the semi-annual project management oversight report. Violet, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Violet Gunka, and I'm the Division Manager for Project Management Oversight and Compliance. Today, I will present the current semi-annual report on Project Management Oversight, or PMO. Next slide, please. RTA implements the PMO program pursuant to Section 2.01B of the RTA Act. RTA is required to oversee the Service Board's capital programs and expenditures. PMO is part of RTA's fulfillment of this requirement. The focus of the PMO program is implementation, delivery, and completion of active projects. It includes oversight of all state-funded transit projects, regardless of budget, and all other projects with budgets of $10 million or more, regardless of funding source. The PMO program supports the RTA's Invest in Transit strategic plan as we focus on ensuring that we are efficient stewards of capital funding. Through this program, we work with the RTA capital team and the service boards to ensure that capital funding is spent efficiently and effectively. The projects presented in the PMO report show how we deliver value on our investments, build upon the strong transit network that we have, and help our transit system stay competitive. RTA and the service boards have been working on improving the transparency of the capital program. The information in the semi-annual PMO report provides details on current projects in the region. The report was provided to you with the board materials, and it will be published on the RTA website following the board meeting. Also, updated PMO project information is available on the RTA's Mapping and Statistics website, also referred to as RTAMS. Next slide, please. The majority of the current state projects are funded by the $2.6 billion Rebuild Illinois State Bond Program and by $227 million in ongoing annual gas tax revenue available for capital projects, referred to as PAYGO. At this time, we have many state-funded projects starting up, so we would like to provide some background on the PMO process. First, the service boards complete and submit the grant applications for the Rebuild Illinois and PAYGO funding that are reviewed and approved by the RTA and IDOT. After the grant funds are awarded, the service boards finish up their project planning and complete the procurement process for the project. Once the procurement process is completed at the service board level, the RTA concurs on the procurements and a notice to proceed is issued. The RTA PMO process starts once there is an executed agreement with the contractor and project scope activities have commenced. From this point, the PMO considers the project to be active. The PMO team monitors the scope, schedule, and budget against the baseline approved in the executed contract documents. All active PMO projects are included in the PMO report. A project exits the PMO process once it reaches substantial completion. At this time, there are many more Rebuild Illinois and PAYGO projects in the procurement process at the service boards, but they are not yet included in the PMO report. To summarize, RTA PMO projects are a subset of the capital program, and the PMO report provides a snapshot in time of the currently active PMO projects. Next slide, please. This PMO report includes 81 active projects that have over $2.4 billion of state funding. Of the 17 new projects, 5 are new Rebuild Illinois projects that entered the PMO process, and 12 new PAYGO projects which are included in this report for the first time. Most of the new projects were funded with the 2022 PAYGO funds. The 81 active projects in the report also include 4 state-funded projects that are funded with prior year's programs, as the service boards are still wrapping up some older projects and using up any remaining funds. The 73 current projects with budgets of $10 million or more represented in this report show an investment of over $7.4 billion into our transit system. This funding includes what has already been expanded and what is obligated for these projects. Some of them span over multiple years. There were 8 new PMO projects with budgets of $10 million or more added since the last reporting period. Next slide, please. To date, $2.6 billion in Rebuild Illinois funding has been awarded to the service boards for 77 projects approved in the grant applications. As of November, $354 million, or 13.6% of the total Rebuild Illinois funding has been expanded. Of the 77 Rebuild Illinois projects, 46 are active, 6 have been completed to date, and 25 are in the planning and procurement state with the service boards. Similarly, $681 million of PAYGO funding has been awarded for a total of 68 projects approved in the grant applications. At this time, over $351 million, or 51.6% of total PAYGO funding has been expanded. Of the 68 PAYGO projects, 44 are active, 10 have been completed, and the remaining 14 are in the planning and procurement state at the service boards. Next slide, please. We briefly touched on the state-funded project budgets on the last slide. All of them are on budget. With respect to scope, there were 3 change orders executed in this reporting period, and 89% of the projects are without change orders. The majority of the projects are in the beginning stages, so there are not a lot of change orders at this time. All change order justifications were reviewed and concurred on by the RTA. Next slide, please. To increase transparency on timelines for project implementation, 2 types of schedules are tracked in the PMO report. The overall project schedule is submitted by the service boards with the grant application, and it includes internal service board activities such as final planning, the procurement of a contractor for the project, as well as the actual project implementation. This schedule provides a general projection of when the project will be completed, and it tracks the project all the way through closeout. As shown on the pie chart on the left side of the slide, we can see that 59% of projects are behind the overall schedule. This means that the final planning activities, procurements, and project implementation are taking longer than the service boards anticipated when the grant applications were submitted. The project implementation schedule starts once the notice to proceed has been issued to the contractor, and it tracks how the contractor is performing against the schedule included in the executed contract documents. This schedule can be changed if there are unforeseen conditions or scope changes. The schedule revisions are approved by the service boards, and once approved, the project implementation is tracked against the revised schedule. The PMO team tracks the project under this schedule through substantial completion. On the pie chart shown on the right side of the slide, we can see that 28% of projects are behind their implementation schedule, which means that the contractor has encountered delays during project execution. In summary, there are more project delays when we look at the overall schedule due to greater uncertainty regarding project activities at the time of grant application. Once the projects move into the project implementation phase, the contractor is held accountable, the project activities are fully defined, and schedules are adhered to on most of the projects. RTA continues to encourage the service boards to have shovel-ready projects with more refined schedules when applying for grant funding. Next slide, please. In the PMO report, we break down the projects into 3 categories, which include construction, maintenance and rehabilitation, and procurements. On this slide, you can see the graphical representation of the projects in these categories at each of the service boards. Construction includes all projects related to design or improvements to stations, bridges, and other transit facilities. The maintenance and rehabilitation includes projects like track, signal, and substation upgrades and improvements, as well as rehabilitation of rolling stock. The last category includes procurement of rolling stock like rail cars or buses, technology like cameras, and parts or materials. As you can see, construction projects account for the majority of PMO projects in this report. Next slide, please. On this slide, we highlight some of the Rebuild Illinois projects. CTA is in the process of building a new facility for maintenance and repair of non-revenue equipment. The facility will also include covered track for equipment storage. The design activities have been completed and the project is in the construction phase. Excavation and foundation pouring work is ongoing. The next project is the Metro Ravenswood Station, where construction continues. The project scope includes longer platforms that are covered, improved lighting, stairs, warming shelters, and landscaping. Major construction activities have been completed. The contractor is currently working on installation of light fixtures and tiles. Finally, we have the new PACE I-55 Plainfield Garage, which is nearing completion of construction. PACE received the occupancy permit for the constructed facility. Installation of equipment and furniture is ongoing and will be completed by the end of this year. PACE has already initiated operations out of the new garage. Next slide, please. On this slide, we highlight state-funded projects that were completed in this reporting period. First, CTA completed the replacement of escalators and canopies at the Irving Park Station. The project included the installation of 2 escalators in the existing openings at the Irving Park Road Station House and the Pulaski Road Station House. It also involved the full replacement of the station canopies. Next, PACE and the City of Joliet completed the construction of a new bus turnaround facility that is part of the Joliet Transportation Center project. The new facility serves 9 PACE routes that connect with the Transportation Center in downtown Joliet on the Metro Rock Island District and Heritage Corridor lines, as well as Amtrak routes. Finally, PACE completed the procurement of 23 paratransit vehicles under this project. Additional vehicles will be purchased with federal funding. Next slide, please. This concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Violet. Questions or comments? Yes, Director Carey.
I have one specific question, then a comment. But first of all, thank you for the report. I think it's a very useful tool for us. There's been a lot of comment about CTA purchasing 500 electric buses, but in reading the report, it appears that 100 of those have already been purchased and another 200, the option's been already
Executed.
taken.
That's correct.
Have them be delivered
Yes,
next year.
so 99 of the base order, 99 buses have been already delivered, and a lot of them are already in service. The last one will be delivered by the end of this year. That's the 100 buses base order. And two options have been executed. The production on the first option has already started. So
Okay.
the next 2 options, each option is for 100 buses, have been executed.
Okay. I bring that up just to clarify for some of the folks that have been talking to us about that issue. And then my comment is on the behind schedule, the 59% behind the initial schedule and the 28% behind the implementation schedule. And your comments, I mean, I was going to ask a question about it, but you really answered all my questions, what might be causing those delays, and that you are encouraging the service bureaus to bring more shovel-ready projects. So I guess as we look at performance-based capital allocation, I know we talk about the spend rate of the money, but I think it would be very useful data to have the service bureaus, you know, what projects and how many of the projects were delayed, you know, specifically from when they first approached us, and then even against the implementation schedule. I think that would be useful data as we look at allocating capital dollars. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Violet, on the delays that Director Carey brought up, how much of that can be attributed to just our supply chain issues in the world, let alone the United States?
I mean, it's hard to put a number on it, but we definitely have a lot of projects that have supply chain issues and workforce issues even, especially on the procurements and even on some of the construction. The reason you see a big difference too, though, is because on the implementation schedule, it's through no fault of the contractor sometimes that there's delays to supply chain. So the service boards revise the schedule and we track it against the revised schedule, but that is all captured in the overall project schedule, which at grant applications, sometimes you cannot anticipate these things. But for transparency purposes, we present both of these just to show and provide some justification for the spend rate on the projects, because obviously if there's delays, the spending is gonna show that trend as well.
Great, thank you. You do a great job. All the staff does. And it's nice to actually have capital money again, because I remember a few years back when we didn't have problems like this. So these are good problems to have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our report is, as you've noticed, getting thicker and thicker, which is good, means a lot more projects.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board.
Thank you very much, Violet. Item 6C is the report on the monthly financial results of 2022. And Sarah Rubino, it's all yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Directors. I'm Sarah Rubino, Principal Analyst in the Budget Division here at the RTA. Today, for informational purposes only, I'll be presenting the Service Board financial results through October, followed by our routine update on the status of federal COVID relief funding. Next slide, please. With only 2 months of results remaining in the budget year, the operating deficits through October remain favorable to budget for each service board and the region as a whole. Each service board's operating expenses were significantly lower than budgeted, and with the exception of ADA Paratransit, each service board's system-generated revenue finished above budget, resulting in the favorable operating deficit variances shown here. Next slide, please. Our other routine update is the status of federal relief funding. The service boards drew only $5 million since last month, and as a region, we have drawn down 43% of the $3.5 billion total. In order to avoid an overdrawn state at year end, Metra and PACE did not requisition any federal COVID relief funding related to October financial results and do not anticipate further drawdown applications until a year-end true-up of 2022, which will be performed when final operating results and sales tax receipts are known. Nevertheless, we project that federal relief funds will begin to exhaust by the end of 2025, leaving an annual budget gap of over $700 million beginning in 2026. You'll hear more about our effort to close that gap in the next agenda item, the strategic plan update. Thank you. That concludes my very brief report. Back to you, Mr. Chairman, for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of Sarah? Thank you. Mr. Secretary, will you please add Representative-elect, that have nice sound to it, Director Mary Beth Canty to the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the record will reflect that.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Item 6D is an update on the strategic plan, including the release of the draft plan for public comment. Jessica Hector Sue and Peter Kirsten will.
Morning, Chairman. Just figuring out our mic situation here. Good morning, everybody. As you know, we've been working for the last 18 months on our next strategic plan, and I'm pleased to report that Transit is the Answer is now out for public comment. So today, I'm going to give you an update on how we're continuing to engage with people on the draft plan, and I have with me Peter Kirsten, who's been a very key staff member in development of the plan. He's going to walk you through what's actually in the document. So on the next slide, let's talk about how we've rolled out the plan. So we released the document on December 5th, and we've distributed it through a number of means. We issued a press release, as Leanne mentioned in our ED report, and conducted a variety of media outreach. Our comms team did a great job with that, and it generated a number of articles that Leanne mentioned, and we'll make sure that we've made sure that you've seen those, and we'll continue to do that. We've also done social media pushes on multiple channels and sent toolkits to our partners to make sure that they can help us promote it as well. We also sent it out in our newsletter and followed up with stakeholders in a personalized way just to make sure that anybody who's actually been involved sees the plan and has an opportunity to talk with us about it. On December 7th, we conducted a joint public hearing with our budget team to engage with people. And more is actually planned in the coming days with our blog, and you'll see more on that. So the draft plan is available for public comment through January 9th. Instructions for how to provide comment are on our website. We've made it very easy. People can complete a comment form if they'd like. They can also email communications@rtachicago.org, or they can send us some good old-fashioned snail mail if they want to as well. So on the next slide, let's go ahead and dive into the plan itself. So we've said this to you a few times, but I just want to underscore that from the outset, we really wanted this process to be different than our previous processes. It was clear that we really needed to take a Big Tent approach this time, which meant broadening our audience and providing some new ways to engage. We also wanted to create feedback loops throughout the entire process between us and you and our stakeholders and our riders and members of the public, and really to continue to check in throughout rather than waiting until the end to ask for feedback. And this new approach really allowed us to do a few things. It allowed us to listen early, to co-create a lot of the plan elements truly, and to eventually coalesce around the vision that is in the plan and the agenda for advocacy and action that includes all of the things that we've heard from people that are important to our stakeholders. So just to remind you that the engagement process was quite extensive. It began last fall with you all. We had 20 guest bloggers come, blog for us, I should say, and many speakers come to these meetings and speak with you. We had over 2,600 responses to 3 different public surveys put out over the last 18 months. We held over 100 hours of stakeholder meetings. more maybe than some would hope for, but they were very interesting. 8 public workshops and events across all of our 6 counties, and we had over 20,000 people following us on social media. So we also employed a new virtual format for our hearing last week, and that included time with people in a main room, and then time for people to have in breakout rooms to talk with staff a little bit more about some of the issues in the plan. And you have really served as a key sounding board. So I just want to thank all of you for your input, for your leadership. It's been really important, and you've heard updates from us at almost every meeting. We really appreciate that, and it really is made for a better product. So the listening and the engagement will certainly continue in 2023 as we continue to build the coalition to achieve the agenda for advocacy and action. I'm going to hand it off to Peter now to talk through the actual contents of the plan.
Thanks, Jessica. Thanks to the board. Good to be with you here this morning. Go to the next slide. So through this new process and with these new voices, we developed the following vision: safe, reliable, accessible public transportation that connects people to opportunity, advances equity, and combats climate change. On the next slide are the 3 principles that will continue to guide the work: equity, stewardship, and committed to change. As we've said, the vision and principles have been really the central criteria guiding all plan development for both RTA staff, all the different stakeholders, partners, and riders we've engaged along the way. Next slide. So the plan clearly articulates the acute need for transit funding in our region. We have shared this graphic with you throughout the fall, and the draft plan lays out the reality that we have an estimated regional transit budget deficit of about $730 million beginning in 2026, representing about 20% of the total operating budget. Recall that there are 2 main drivers to this deficit. First, expenses are higher. In the near term, inflation is certainly going to be a challenge, but labor is the dominant expense category. Attracting and retaining talent, which is a serious and ongoing challenge for the transit industry, requires competitive compensation and benefits. The second reason for the deficit is that fewer people are riding the system than did in 2019. We anticipate that there will be lasting changes to the ways that people commute, such that we don't expect ridership to return to 2019 levels by 2026 or really any time over the next decade. Note that this is not unique to our region. Peer regions and transit agencies throughout the country are facing proportionately similar deficits. This is a major funding crisis that we are facing, and we really need to work together to address. Next slide. The draft plan also lays out the immense benefit that transit brings to our region. In just 2022 alone, the service provided by CTA, Metra, and PACE is estimated to deliver $17.2 billion in regional benefits. Put another way, for every dollar we invest in transit through the operating and capital budgets, the residents and communities of our region receive $3.86 in overall benefits, and that's what you see visualized on the screen. Put another way still, there is a high cost to failing to adequately fund our system, and that cost is borne by the region. Next slide. Historically, transit agencies have 2 levers to address an operating budget deficit: raise fares or cut service. The draft plan makes it clear that it is impossible for RTA and the service boards to solve the funding cliff we are facing by raising fares and cutting service alone. Fare increases of the magnitude needed to fill the budget gap, roughly doubling from what they are today, would drive down ridership and negate additional revenue brought in by higher fares. It would also render the system unaffordable for many. Throughout this process, we asked people how the region should respond to a potential future budget deficit by scaling back service or pursuing additional funding for transit. Survey respondents overwhelmingly indicated that RTA should pursue additional funding to both maintain our system and even see increased investment to make transit safer, more reliable, and accessible to everyone rather than cutting service. Next slide. Knowing that a future fiscal cliff is looming, RTA and the service boards are working hard to avert these financial challenges and evolve toward a more sustainable funding structure. 27 federal, state, and local revenue policies to support the Chicago regional transit system were identified, analyzed, and evaluated over the summer by a technical working group. Elements of this have been shared with the board previously. Each revenue policy was scored based on several criteria, including annual yield, stability, nexus with transportation, equity, and the resources needed to establish the revenue source and collect the revenue. The draft plan includes a summary of this analysis, including the bar chart shown on the screen, that reflects the top 11 potential revenue sources ordered here in estimated annual yield. Our analysis also demonstrates that no single funding solution would be able to generate sufficient revenue alone to avert the projected fiscal cliff of $730 million in 2026. That's for the existing transit system, let alone to fund major improvements or expansions to the system that the public want to see. The region will need to explore options in these areas and pursue potentially multiple state and local funding mechanisms. Next slide. The draft plan also reinforces the need for ongoing capital funding. Capital funding was the focus of the last Regional Transit Strategic Plan, Invest in Transit. And while our region's capital investments needs remain substantial, there has been progress with passage of Rebuild Illinois and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act signed into law in 2021, as well as administrative improvements at the RTA and service boards to improve transparency and speed up delivery. The draft plan as well includes recommendations from the Capital Project Working Group to use 12 new evaluation themes and metrics to analyze projects that will be incorporated into the 5-year capital program. So beginning with the 2024 budget cycle, so next year, projects will be evaluated on themes including racial equity and mobility justice, economic development, climate impact, state of good repair, and other themes. Next slide. The draft plan includes the detailed agenda for advocacy and action that we are advancing to realize the vision articulated in this plan. The agenda was co-created through the working group process. You have no doubt heard us talk about the agenda, dividing between advocacy items, that are longer term issues that will need stakeholders to help advance, and the action items that are more immediate under the control of the RTA and service boards. The plan document will also include important background and evidence to make the case for each item, input provided by stakeholders through the working groups, related accomplishments, including projects, pilots, and activities that have been implemented since Invest in Transit, activities that RTA, CTA, Metra, and PACE, as well as CMAP, are taking in 2023 to support these advocacy and action areas, and then also differentiating those between individual agency actions or shared regional activities that we'll share in a moment. And then lastly, the action areas, there's also a short description of what is possible if the region works together to pursue more resources. So in many cases, this is more funding, but also political will, collective action, and building capacity to improve our system. Next slide. So advancing the agenda for advocacy and action starts now, and with the remaining slides, we'll share we'll share with you these regional activities that the RTA is committed to begin implementing in 2023. These are divided into 3 categories: transit funding, rider experience, and thriving communities. The slide here shows transit funding. So in 2023, we will take affirmative steps forward to secure increased funding for transit operations and make the system less reliant upon fare revenue. We'll do this through executing a broad public outreach campaign of education about transit funding and continuing to engage a coalition that will secure sustainable ongoing funding. We'll do this through collaborating with regional partners to identify funding options and develop revenue proposals. And we'll do this through obtaining continued recovery ratio relief from the Illinois legislature while developing permanent funding structural reform. Next slide. This slide shows the rider experience. In 2023, we will deliver a set of new regional transit initiatives that will make the system better for riders. This will include convening a region-wide cross-sector safety and security summit to facilitate information sharing and explore holistic solutions to the challenges affecting transit. This will include seeking funding to pilot an expanded regional free or reduced fare program available to people experiencing low incomes to make the system more affordable and advance our understanding about the barriers that fares present to riders. Lastly, this will include commissioning an independent review of the accessibility and quality of rider communication, signage, and information sharing across and between agencies. Next slide. So the third area is thriving communities. In 2023, we will collaboratively begin development of 3 regional action plans to program investments that support a thriving region. This will include a regional blueprint for improved accessibility, building upon service board plans, and providing a comprehensive inventory of capital projects while supporting infrastructure improvements needed to achieve a fully accessible regional transit system. Second, a regional transit climate action plan that builds upon, again, existing service board plans and identifies how transit can support the region's climate action goals. This will outline regional strategies that will encourage more people to ride transit and chart a course to reduce the footprint of the transit system and move toward zero emissions for transit operations. Thirdly, a transit-friendly communities policy, which will be an updating of the RTA's Setting the Stage for Transit report to set standards for communities and hold them accountable for land use decisions and improving access to transit to ensure riders can travel safely and efficiently. Next slide. Lastly, the plan outlines how we will measure progress against these ambitious goals that we've set out. As a framework for measuring progress, we're returning to where we started with the emerging vision and the initial working groups that began plan development. So we started this process by envisioning the type of transit system that we need and the type of region that a great transit system can help build. Our performance measures will be based around these outcomes. So in terms of the system, we talked about a future, in the future, our system will be safe, accessible, reliable, useful for riders, in a state of good repair, and financially stable. In the future, our region will be connected, winning the fight against climate change and thriving. For each element of the outcomes, the plan outlines strategic performance measures for the transit system and the region. Some measures will look familiar, such as safety and security incidents, on-time performance, and customer satisfaction. Others will be new measures reflecting new priorities in the plan, such as tons of CO2 per passenger mile, carbon offsets by mode choice, regional miles of dedicated bus lanes, and residential density within a half-mile of transit facilities. So you can expect revised measures to make a showing in reports that we'll be providing to you beginning next year. Next slide. So in summary, the plan lays out a path to position the system for long-term success by seeking new funding, making improvements for riders, and supporting communities working to increase transit access. We recognize we can't do this alone, and as we share this draft plan with the region, we're asking people to join our coalition, to work with us to achieve sustainable funding for transit and build a better system for everyone who relies on it. Many of the advocacy and action items in this plan are not under the control of RTA, CTA, Metro, or PACE, and leadership from a diverse group of elected officials and community leaders will be needed to achieve meaningful change. And with that, I will pass it back to Jessica for next steps and to close out our presentation.
Thanks, PK. So with that overview, we hope that you will go to the website, that you will check out the plan and share it with your networks and your constituencies, and stay tuned. With we will receive public comment, as I mentioned, by January 9th, and we'll turn that around very quickly to revise anything that we need to revise in the plan. Meanwhile, a beautiful layout is being done right now on a graphically designed plan, so we're still on track to bring you a final document at your February 2023 meeting. So thank you for your time today. Thank you again for your engagement throughout this. Thank you in advance for helping us implement the plan, and that concludes our presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions. Back to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Jessica and Peter. Questions or comments? Director Ross.
First of all, I want to publicly compliment the staff for the work on this plan. I've done it with almost all of them individually, but I think this has been a great piece of work and incorporated as many comments from our constituent groups as is possible. I do have a question, though. I'd like for you to respond to the comment from the person who spoke online regarding near zero emission, because when I read that statement, I interpreted it completely differently than what the individual said. I didn't think it had anything to do with natural gas or any other form of energy for our transportation system. So could you clarify that statement for me, please?
Sure, yeah. So I would say that the comment is duly noted. You know, that action item really looks at reducing emissions from transit. And the way that we phrased it was based on early input that we got, both from stakeholders and from the service boards, about the realities of the processes that they need to go through to overhaul their fleets. So the words that are in there were intentionally chosen, but we appreciate the comment from our commenter, and we will continue to hear those comments and consider changing that language. The commitment isn't changing. Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's written broadly, but we can certainly lean into that more if we feel like stakeholders are asking for that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Director Andolcio, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, based on the comments this morning and what we've heard, and looking at one of winning the fight against climate change that you presented, I think I'd like to get a little bit of clarification. How does that align with the comments that we heard this morning in your strategic plan?
Yeah,
And I know that on part of your strategic plan, I wrote a memo or some suggestions on the SDGs. So I just want to try to get some clarification on that. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Fantastic question. I think the approach that we're trying to take with the strategic plan overall is very much, as the chairman mentioned a minute ago, that, transit itself is really the best way to reduce the region's carbon emissions, and that the more that we can do to strengthen our transit system and make sure that we don't have to cut service, the better. So that's sort of number one. I think beyond that, we really have heard input from stakeholders that the transit system itself needs to think about our own carbon footprint. And so the climate action plan, that's one of our 2023 actions, is intended to do that. RTA did do a green transit plan maybe 10 years ago. And in that plan, we talked about, under Leanne's leadership and planning, I think back then, we did talk about, how the transit system needed to green our own services and systems, and progress has been made toward that. It was sort of quiet, I think, behind the capital funding issues and a lot of the other things that were really taking the focus during that time frame. But a lot has been done to improve the facilities themselves with better lighting, with sort of quiet things that you don't really hear about, but really do reduce the impact of the transit system. So the climate action plan is intended to build upon that and really update it for today's time. Think about how that we as the region as a whole can reduce our emissions, and how transit can electrify our system and take other actions. And there is a mention, I don't know if you saw it, but we did make sure that the Sustainable Development Goals were referenced in the plan. It's something that we need to look at. So thank you for that input earlier on.
Thank you. Thank you. So as the chairman said, we move about 1 million people a day. So putting that in perspective, if 1 million people were driving, the carbon emissions that it would be generating compared to, so I just wanted to get a level of perspective. I thank you for that. It was a great answer. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, I attribute those comments to a professor I had in law school, David, who said all of life is a balancing act and you need to just keep things in total perspective. It's not to say we're not moving towards electrification and doing all these things, and we are, and we're pushing the CTA, but you just need to keep track of who your friends really are, as Director Canny will find out when she gets to the legislature, and keep the full picture in front of you. And if you care about the climate, you'll ride mass transit, for better or for worse, the way it is today, or as we improve it. Any other questions or comments? I do tell people who see me, Jessica and Peter, it's a draft, give us your input. It's not the be all end all, and literally there are thousands of hours of activity in here, and it's just not necessarily the CTA or the RTA's plan. It's the input of many, many, many people and groups. So thank you. Yes, Director Keeney.
I just want to make one final comment because I might not get to make one after today. I want to thank you for
You'll have the final say, Mary Beth.
for the work that you put into it. But I hope that we can take from this a real opportunity to drive the change that we want to see for the region. I know we have to get the input from Metra and CTA and PACE, and we have to work with them, and they kind of have to drive their own things. But I think we have a real opportunity financially and with the world writ large right now to take the reins and bring them along with us. And I think sometimes they are looking to us for that. And I think we've got a really nice place to go from here, and they blend up into that. So I appreciate all the work that you've put in here, and let's take this opportunity to really drive it everywhere that it needs to be.
Thank you.
Amen. Any other questions or comments? We have not seen the last of this, so thank you very much.
We've not. Thank you. Thank you.
Item 6E is on the General Assembly's request for CMAP's transit recommendations, and Laura Wilkeson, our Senior Director of and Policy Advisor from CMAP, give us a report and remind us of where we're at and what this is.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today, and you'll realize why I went just right after Jessica and Peter, because there is so much similarity and connection to your strategic plan as we move this forward, and we'll be building off the strategic plan, so we'll be talking about that today. I kind of consider this and also to your strategic plan, right? It really does build from the work that the staff here has been doing, and we're excited to be a partner as we kind of move forward in this. The next slide actually starts to talk about, again, I know that Executive Director Redden and the staff have talked to you about this before, is that earlier this year, Representative Delgado and State Senator Ram Villavalam co-sponsored and passed a piece of legislation that requires the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning for coming up for legislative recommendations about what the state of Illinois can do to really look at, again, that operating deficit that you guys have been talking about every board meeting, and what we would bring forward as recommendations. So we have started that process and really wanted to make sure that we're communicating with you as the board, communicating with our board. We're meeting weekly with staff here at RTA. I keep joking we're gonna roll out some sleeping bags at each other's offices, because we're gonna be spending a lot of time in the next year to work together to fulfill this mandate that the General Assembly has given us. So I'm going to go into a little bit about our approach and what the legislation has asked us to do to get your input and share information with you. So the next slide actually gets into what the legislative mandate is. This is actually the language of the legislation. I'm not even synthesizing. This is what it's asking us to do, is to take a look at the long-term financial viability of the transit system. Looking at that as a comprehensive system, we need to look at safety, security, cleanliness, efficiency, and what fosters efficient land use. We need to take into consideration, as we look at the different recommendations that we're bringing forward, racial equity, climate change, economic development, and again, as we noted, the strategic planning efforts that just are ongoing right now. In order to look at solutions, they want us to bring forward recommendations that deal with the recovery ratio, sales tax formulas, governance structures, regional fare systems, and anything else we think that we need to bring forward. It's broad. We could spend years, you guys have spent years talking about all of these issues. This is due to the General Assembly in January of 2024, needs to be passed by our board and our policy committee at CMAP, which we are aiming for October of 2023. So we have about 10 months to figure this out. So we're going to talk a little about how we're approaching this, because we do need to put in bounding boxes of what we're going to be looking at. We also do not want to start from scratch. And so I'll talk a little bit about how we're building from the work that's already been done, and then how we're going to approach that. Next slide. So when the pandemic began, CMAP staff said, this is really going to impact our mobility system, not just the transit system, right, but our roads, as we're seeing that right now. If people choose to drive to work, or they're only driving Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, or coming downtown, or they're not moving throughout the region at all, how is that going to impact the mobility system? So we started a project ourselves to look at what did we think this was going to do to a mobility system. Some of the things have rebounded. Some of them are staying as they were during the pandemic. We also knew, as again, this body did as well, that there were essential workers that we're going to need to be moving, that 60% of our workforce in this region has to be on site. So a lot of people think about where people are going to stay home and work from home. Well, there's only a certain amount of the population that has the ability to do that. And so we also need to account for those 60% of workers that need to be on site when you've got hospitals and manufacturing, again, different industries, logistics that we have here in the region. So we took a look at this and we came up with our 3 pillars of investing in a stronger and more financially secure transit system. So there's a lot of work we've done, again, with RTA staff during that time period, looking at different active modes for people. We saw a lot of people walking and biking more during the pandemic. We want to make sure that we retain that does not get lost. And then we also saw a lot of increase in e-commerce and freight activity. As you all know, as you're getting your different holiday presents and things getting delivered straight to your door. Those are things people are not, very interested in giving up. So we're seeing a lot of smaller trucks on our roads and in our communities. So these are things from a whole mobility system we needed to take a look at. So we're going to build on that work. Next slide. And then we have been working again with your staff here as with the strategic plan process also began and worked through, because we want to build on the financial planning and strategic planning that's here. There's been a lot of community outreach, as Peter and Jessica just shared with you. We do not want to restart that process. We are not thinking about how do we reimagine the transit system from scratch. It is all building on the work that's already been done. How do we leverage that to move forward? So next slide, please. In addition to that, we recognize CMAP and RTA are not the only ones that have been looking at this. Each of the service boards has all been thinking about how they need to change and innovate, what they can be doing. So again, I think I just want to leave this with you is that we are not starting from scratch on this. We really want to leverage and build forward. That being said, next slide, please. We have a lot to do in the next 10 months. Again, we've spent the last period of the fall scoping and trying to project plan for this. We did a presentation to our joint board in October, continuing to pull together a steering committee, which I will talk about in a minute, that is required by the law. And then in the next 10 months, we're going to be doing a lot of outreach ourselves. We understand that there's a lot of people that are interested in this and want to be a part of this. And because we're not doing a full general public engagement process, we want to make sure we're working with a lot of our stakeholders and working with you and again, the service boards to bring all of the legislative recommendations forward over the next 10 months. I'll talk again a little bit about how we're going to do that. As I mentioned, we are planning to take this to our board for approval in their October joint meeting. That is our goal. And then we say here in the next 2 months, we'll socialize that with the General Assembly. But I think the reality is we're going to be socializing all these issues with you, with the General Assembly and with the governor's office over the course of the entire year. This isn't something we want to hand over in January of 2024 and say fill the budget hole in the next session. We really need to be having those conversations. And again, that's what we'll be doing in partnership with you guys over the course of the next year. So talking a little bit, next slide, on the approach. The legislation requires that we convene a steering committee. It actually also mandates the types of people that need to be on that steering committee. It asks for representation from an environmental community, community organizations, civic organizations, business, and labor. We've also added academia to that. There are people who've spent a lot of time working on these issues. We want to bring them to the table. We've also added, as we started to pull this group of people together, really looking through the lens of geographic diversity. We really want this to be something, again, from the entire region, and also racial diversity, so that we have that different voices on the steering committee itself. We're working on pulling all of those steering committee members together right now in our approach to have them meet in January for the first time. There's about 30 people that we are targeting to work with. We are not having any public sector representation on that particular steering committee. We want to work with our public sector partners through the structure we already have through our board, MPO, Council of Mayors, Council of Governments, this board, et cetera. We really want to bring some of those different voices. And again, thinking about the coalition that we need that is in the strategic plan, these are another group of people that can be part of the coalition.
So we're taking the 30 people and we're asking each of them to join one of 3 working groups. So each of the working group members will also be part of that steering committee. And we're going to approach it in the system we want. So that's a little bit about what do we need to do to the experience, what are the different changes we need to have there, and then how to pay for it and how to implement it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And like we said, we'll receive input from our public sector partners and the subject matter experts as well as we move forward. Next slide. Want to make sure, as I was saying, because we already have a structure of public sector participants, that we're going to be meeting with our steering committee 5 times throughout the year. We're going to be having working group meetings with them that I'll talk about in just a moment. We'll be having input with stakeholders and partner organizations. Right now, we have about 17 pages worth of stakeholders that we want to talk with. But we're also going to leverage the outreach that you all are doing as you move forward with the strategic plan. We don't need to be calling people together twice. And as we all know, the general public really sees this as one seamless thing. And so we want to be talking about it as one seamless thing. So again, we're meeting weekly with staff here and make sure that we're all coordinating and leveraging all of our outreach so that we're saying the same thing, talking with the, around the same topic. So that's something we'll be doing. And then again, having the board approval in October. So a little bit, next slide, about how we're looking at the report content in those 3 different subsectors. Again, trying to kind of put our bounding boxes. This isn't going to be everything that has to do with the transit system. And it's also not everything that CMAP's going to be supportive of in the next year. So if we talk about state of good repair or federal funding for capital, that's still a conversation we can be having, but it's not what we're going to be doing in this particular scope of project. So we're really wanting to look at, when we talk about the system we want, focusing really on how does regional rail work in this region, better bus service, fare integration, transit-oriented development, and ADA accessibility. So we're kind of putting our scope and bounding boxes on that for the system we want. Again, there's a lot of other issues, a lot of other things that can be addressed in the system that we want. For this particular set of recommendations to go to the state legislature and the things that they need to be taking up, those are the things we're going to be focused on. And the how to pay for it, obviously revenue sources. You saw the 11 sources that Peter put up on the slide. A lot of those we're going to talk about. Those that, again, the state would be active in playing a part in. There's some other different things that might have to move in different areas. We really want to focus in on, the motor fuel tax, public transportation funds, fare revenue, again, the recovery ratio, new tolling, vehicle miles traveled, congestion pricing, and then also cost efficiencies. And I think it's also important to note when we talk about cost efficiencies, that's a discussion that we'll be having with you in the service boards. It's not coming up with random ideas. We really need to keep this very specific and focused and targeted to meet our timelines and to be productive in something that the General Assembly can actually take up and move in the time period that we need it to before the fiscal cliff happens. And then how to implement it. We've been asked to look at governance structures, funding allocations, planning responsibilities. We're going to take a look at those and see if there's recommendations for the state government. We're also working on putting principles to this approach, similar to what you guys had discussed in your strategic plan. Things like we're focusing on operating, we're focusing on things the state can take action on. So again, to try to keep the expectations of everyone that we're working with on what this report actually can be and what we're focused on. Next slide. So what we need from you, I think we already have it, internal and external partnership. I think it's going to take our region and the people who care about transit working closely together if we're going to be able to make change in the next year in order for the state legislature to move on different activities. Again, technical expertise, we are doing that day to day with your staff here, as well as many of our other stakeholders, many of our other implementers. A regional perspective, I think this has really been key, and I think you guys talked about it at City Club the other day, is that this isn't a downtown City of Chicago issue. It is a regional issue, and it affects all of our communities throughout the region. And so we want to make sure that that's a voice that we are bringing to the table and recognizing. Again, it's a partnership in an expedited timeline. I know we are all busy people, but we are in a short timeline to deal with this. And so we're asking a lot of our partners to make sure that they are with us as we move quickly through this process. we'd like to have proactive discussions on complex issues. It is not unknown to us that we are going to talk about some very sensitive things that some people are going to easily say, yes, I'd love to support that. And somebody else is like, there's no way I want to talk about that. In order to do that, we really want to have proactive discussions because we know that these are going to be complex things, again, that we've dealt with for a long time. And then I think the last one is that once we have this plan of action, the strategic plan, that, you know, we are all committed to moving that forward. We want to talk in one voice. It's going to be important for all of the advocates and coalition that is built when we get to the point of going to Springfield, that we're all speaking in one voice about what we need in order for something to actually happen. So we're excited about this. We know it's a lot of work in the next year. And then the last slide is next steps. Again, we're meeting with all of you. We are meeting with staff. We are meeting with our board members. We're starting to kick through those 17 pages of stakeholders we want to talk to. We're going to keep this as also as transparent as possible, going through events like this, our board, our working committees. We're launching the steering committee in mid-January. And then again, we're going to continue our ongoing coordination with the RTA so that, again, this is something we're doing in partnership over the next year. I'm excited to be here today, and I'll take any questions. Oh, these are our staff members that are working on it. My apologies, project team leadership. If you needed to get a hold of any of us, I'll be the executive sponsor for this, making sure that we're moving through this process. Amy Lee, formerly of RTA and CTA, is going to be a very specific content director for a lot of the work that we're going to be bringing forward. Elizabeth and Daniel are program manager and project manager. So all of us are available to any of you for any questions along the way. Now I'm done.
Great. Questions or comments? Yes, Director Canty.
I thank you for the presentation. Am I to understand this is really just for the Chicagoland region, or is this looking at transit statewide?
No, it'd just be for the RTA region.
Okay. I have thoughts. I'll keep them to myself.
That's fine. It actually, yeah, so the legislation was an amendment to the RTA Act, so it is specific to this area, but happy to take any questions or thoughts about the whole thing.
Any other questions? Yes, Director Holt.
Good morning. Could you talk a little bit more about the decision not to include transit on the steering committee? It strikes me as it's a little counterintuitive when you're talking about regional transit planning to not actually include any of the service providers who are the ones who the ones who provide the service and who are engaged to not be on the steering committee. So I'd like for you to talk about that a little bit more, please.
Sure. And we have had several conversations and have kind of put together a structure of having conversations with both the leadership, boards, and staff at each of the service boards. So again, we're working closely with all of them, and again with the RTA staff here. Because we are asking, the legislation is asking for the steering committee to provide input, not decisions. It is our board and our MPO policy committee that are actually the decision makers for this piece of this report, which they sit on. So the service boards and RTA have seats at our MPO policy committee. They have a place to have that conversation with us. We wanted to have kind of a neutral space for people that weren't the owners to be able to provide input and voices. And I think that we have been received that that's relatively understandable to the service boards. That doesn't preclude us from having them come to steering committee meetings and providing subject matter expertise. And we've talked about that. There'll be moments that the finance directors may need to come in and explain something. We've invited RTA to be there as well so that there is, representation, but really wanted to have a neutral space that to allow those other voices to be heard and provide input, and that we have a space for the service boards right now to be doing that with us.
Other questions or comments? Director Carey.
Thank you. Thank you for answering Director Holt's question. I had the same question, just some concern that RTA and the service boards weren't on the steering committee, but it sounds like you're including them at a detail level. My other concern, and it's probably more a concern than a question, is we've just completed and will adopt in February our strategic plan, and we would move into implementation. It seems to me that this exercise and it's not your decision that we're engaged in this exercise, or nor CMAP's decision, might slow us down a little bit. So you mentioned socialization of some of the issues as you go through the year. I guess I would hope that, because some of the key, we have 3 years to figure out how we're going to solve the financial. And if we wait completely to a year from now to start to move forward on anything as simple as, let's say, not as simple, but as a recovery ratio, I mean, absent this initiative, we would be down in Springfield, and we probably still will be, saying, yeah, we need to change the recovery ratio. So I would hope that the process, and I'm sure you recognize this, doesn't delay us in solving our issues.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So like, there is nothing in the conversation we're having that precludes any of the conversations that need to be happening during this session. You know, if a recovery ratio result, it happens in this session, you know, that's wonderful. That's something that we need to have. We're not asking anybody to wait until this report is done to look at any of these. If we can solve or institute or implement things that may come out of this, that's wonderful. We're not asking anybody to wait. But we do recognize there will probably be complex issues that will take longer than this General Assembly session. And that's, again, why we're having weekly coordination meetings, so that we can be supportive of the different things. And together, when we're in Springfield, having these conversations, saying the same thing.
Any other questions? On the steering committee, people with disabilities, what are you doing with people with disabilities with respect to a steering committee?
Absolutely. So Access Living is going to be part of the steering committee meeting.
I remember in my first couple of weeks as the chairman, I went out to Washington, and I remember meeting with the Assistant U.S. Secretary of Transportation. This is back when Governor Rauner was talking about reducing ADA funding and other things. And he looked at me in the eye and said, this is not a transportation issue. This is a federal civil rights issue. And you have federal courts that will keep your governor from, you know, reducing ADA paratransit. So I just want to make sure that the people with disabilities community is involved. BOMA, in the building operators and managers and the people that own this real estate, what's their input into the steering committee?
So BOMA themselves are not on the steering committee currently, but we have them on our stakeholders list. We do have different business and civic organizations that talk for and with the different real estate and chambers and businesses. We do are targeting having a few associations, specifically of businesses and organizations that deal, again, with essential workers. So if you talk about people that need to be moving through the system, that even if we don't have a specific individual that is an essential worker, that we have representation for that voice as well.
As Mayor Emanuel used to say, Chicago and Illinois have 1/3 of all the teaching hospitals, but we have Sinai and a safety net system, Roseland, that is just critical. But those hospital workers who use our system 24 hours a day are just critical, and we need their input as well. What about looking at other cities? New York, but London. I always have people say, well, you know, how come we can't have a tube system like London? And I tell them immediately, London spends 9 times per capita than what we do in Chicago or Illinois for mass transit. So you give me 9 times more money and I'll give you a system much better than London's. London doesn't run 24 hours a day, contrary to what people may think as well. But are you going to look at other major cities, not only in the United States, but worldwide?
Absolutely. You know, our research team at CMAP, which I think that we were asked to do some of this, is that, you know, we could bring in a lot of those best practices from, again, different places. I think, again, to Peter's comment earlier, you know, there's a lot of other places that are also facing this and how they're going to be approaching it. Again, we talk about how they're funded, right? And I think that's, again, one of the things that you guys have been working on and grappling with, is that we are asked to be funded a different way than a lot of these other big systems. So being able to look at why their funding may be more stable from other sources than, again, what we've been asked and mandated to do in this region. So we want to look at, we want to look at best practices, and we also want to look at how other systems are funded, and why that impacts the system in a different way than we've been impacted.
Just one other comment on London. They also charge a fee to drive into their central city, which I think, probably needs to get added to a menu of different options as well. I'm not saying that we want to do that, but I'm just giving you the reality of where other cities, how they get sufficient funds to run their mass transit system. And I guess my last comment, just generally to everyone, including those who are watching, everybody can say whatever they want with our system of governance in northeastern Illinois. But over the years, decades, we have the lowest operating cost per mile of any big system in America. We have the fewest mechanical breakdowns, even with older equipment, Chicago weather, than any other place in America. And on our operating costs, we use union labor. So folks can say whatever they want, and cost is not everything. I might not want to be the lowest cost per mile if we can provide better, fairer, and more equitable service. It's not the be-all, end-all, but it sure is a heck of a good measurement on how we're operating mass transit. And I will tell you, when I go to other cities, we are the envy of almost every other city in terms of our mass transit system. So, we all like to grouse and groan, and I know all of the problems that we have out there. But most cities in this country would love to be Chicago's mass transit system, or have our system. But in terms of cost and breakdowns, we hold our own, and generally are the best in the United States of America with the governance system that we have. Can always get better. But I always like to remind people that in terms of breakdowns as well as cost, we're as good as anybody in the country. And then last but not least, going to Director Holtz and Director Carey's comments. One of the things, I got on this board and I've ridden mass transit, the CTA, and Metra all of my life. I served on on committees in Springfield. But until I got here and sat in this chair and sit down with, Don Orsino and his successor, Jim Derwinski, and Dorval Carter, as well as Melinda Metzger or TJ Ross, going back to his days at Pace, it is unbelievably complex to run a mass transit system. And I love my friends at the universities and in academia. But until you are up at 5 a.m., like Jim Derwinski, sitting down the street, trying to run a system on multiple national rail networks, we all think we can just do things like an HO train set and move one train to another track. You can't do that. And they will always remind us how complex it is with their engineers. And then we're the Regional Transportation Authority. They will always remind me, well, Mr. Chairman, there's a federal railroad rule, or, as Dorval will remind us, and nobody knows the US DOT better than Dorval Carter in the mass transit world in this country because he was there. We also have lots of federal requirements. And as the number 2 person at US DOT reminded me, we also have a court system and civil rights laws that dictate what we do as well. So you've got to include the operators because they're the ones that move 1 million or 2 million people, 1/6 of Illinois' population every day. It's nobody in this room that's doing it. And it's so much more complex than anybody can ever imagine. So thank you. CMAP's a great partner with us, and we cross-pollinate our staffs, which I think shows the public on how well we work together. So thank you for everything you do. We appreciate it.
Forward to talking to you again about this as we move forward. Thanks.
All right, let's move on to item 7A, and that's the ordinances authorizing the amendment of the 2022-2026 capital program. Hi, Tara O'Malley. Good morning.
Good morning. Sorry. Yeah, good morning. I'm Tara O'Malley, Principal Financial Analyst in our Capital Program Department here at the RTA. I'm here to request your approval of our final amendment to the 2022 to 2026 capital program. Next slide, please. The funding for the 2022 to 2026 capital program includes changes to the approved funding and projects for CTA, Metra, and PACE. The overall program is increasing by $121.49 million. CTA's program is increasing by $69.05 million, Metra's program by $19.62 million, and PACE's program by $32.82 million. Details of all revenue and project changes can be found in the memo and Schedules 2A and 2B in your board packet. Today, we will highlight some of the additional funding sources that are being programmed as a result of successful applications for federal discretionary funds. Next slide, please. We'll take a moment to talk more about federal funding overall. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act added significant funds for transportation, both in discretionary and formula funding. Formula funding represents about $11.6 billion, or 57%, of federal formula funding nationwide. The RTA regional total for formula funds in 2022 is $729 million, or about 6% of the national total. And you can see the breakout for CTA, Metra, and PACE on the chart to your right. Transit-specific funding opportunities accounts for 43%, transit-specific discretionary opportunities, rather, accounts for 43% of funds, amounting to over $9 billion per year. In addition, there are several other competitive grant opportunities that both roads and transit are eligible for that are not included in the splits above. These programs include the RAISE Grant Program and CMAQ, which include significant additional funding streams for transit. Next slide, please. We wanted to highlight the large discretionary programs made available as a part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act for transit here. Here, we are listing the transit-specific granting opportunities valued at greater than $100 million annually. As stated in the previous slide, over $9 billion in discretionary funds are available on an annual basis nationwide. In the next slides, we will detail some of the discretionary opportunities that have been awarded in 2022. We expect that more funds will be granted in 2023, and we will continue to update you as they are added to the program. Next slide, please. First, we would like to highlight the RAISE grant, or Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity Grant Program. This program is designed to invest in significant projects that meet the objectives of sustainability and equity. In 2022, PACE applied and received a $20 million grant to help fund the Harvey Intermodal Transit Center project that is a joint undertaking between Metra and PACE. Next slide, please. Next, let's look at the 5339B Bus and Bus Facilities Program discretionary funding opportunity. This program supports the purchases of bus and construction of facilities primarily with low or no emission characteristics. CTA received $29 million in funding in the current round of applications, which will fund the Chicago Garage electrification, as well as the purchase of buses and charging equipment, electric buses and charging equipment. Next slide, please. Another discretionary opportunity is the Areas of Persistent Poverty program. The grant provides for studies and plans for transit projects in the areas experiencing long-term economic distress. CTA received a $450,000 grant to work on the planning of the Red Line extension to 130th Street. Next slide, please. Finally, let's look at the community project funding. Projects from this fund are identified in congressional apportionments and support specific communities. CTA received 3 grants from this program in the current amendment. Funding includes $2 million for the 103rd Street garage electrification, $2.1 million for elevator replacements as a part of the All Stations Accessibility Program, or ASAP, and $1.5 million for the Red Line extension design activities. As noted earlier, we will continue to share more awards as they are added to the program. Next slide, please. We are here requesting your approval of the capital amendment to the 2022 to 2026 capital program. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? If not, how about a motion and a second to authorize 7A? Director Carey moves, seconded by Director Fuentes, that we approve the items in 7A. Jeremy, why don't you, Mr. Secretary, take a roll call since Director Canty is here?
Sure. Director Indulcio.
Aye.
Director Canty.
Aye.
Director Carey.
Aye.
Director Colson.
Aye.
Director Fuentes.
Aye.
Director Gavin.
Aye.
Director Gorman.
Aye.
Director Holt.
Aye.
Director Cotel.
Aye.
Director Pang.
Yes.
Director Ross. Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
12 ayes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And 7A is approved. Moving on, item 7B is an ordinance, big one, adopting the 2023 budgets, 2024-25 financial plans, and 2023 to 2027 capital programs of the service boards in our authority, and appropriating funds for the 2023 budgets. Doug, here's your heavy lifting.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
members of the board. This is Doug Anderson, Manager of Budgets and Analysis. Along with my colleague Brian Lowenberg, I will be asking you to consider adoption of the 2023 operating budgets and capital programs of the service boards and RTA, bringing to a close the budget process, which began with the budget call back in May. Next slide, please. As required by the RTA Act, Leanne presented the proposed budget and capital program to each of the 6 county boards during November and December, ending with Kane County earlier this week. RTA staff remained after the county board meetings to receive and consider public comments. Thank you to the many board members who also participated in the county board presentations. Last week, Chairman Dillard presided over the RTA budget hearing via Zoom, held concurrently with the public hearing on the draft strategic plan. Directors Carey, Colson, Gathing, Gorman, Groven, and Ross also attended virtually. Of the more than 100 attendees, 21 residents provided testimony, with most of the comments opposing the ongoing acquisition of diesel and CNG buses in the proposed capital program and calling for urgent electrification of the RTA system. Other comments included concerns about safety and reliability. In addition, 30 written comments were received via chat, email, or comment card, with most of those also regarding opposition to the further procurement of fossil fuel vehicles. We'd like to thank all of the members of the public who provided comments and input on this year's budget and program. Next slide, please. The proposed 2023 regional operating budget totals almost $3.6 billion. This represents expense growth of 6% from the 2022 budget and 11% from the 2022 estimate, as each of the service board contends with the effects of inflation and continues to maintain, and in some cases increase, service levels to encourage further recovery of transit ridership. CTA expenses comprise just over half of the regional operating budget, followed by Metra at 27%, PACE Suburban Service at 8%, PACE ADA Paratransit at 7%, and the RTA Agency at 1%. These expense shares are very similar to previous operating budgets. Next slide, please. The proposed 2023 RTA agency budget totals $36.9 million. This amounts to a decrease of $9.4 million from the 2022 budget because of the every other year pattern of federal grants for 5310 projects that enhance mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities. RTA's 2023 budget will focus on the implementation of the RTA strategic plan. The agency budget comprises administrative expenses and the expenses of providing important regional services for residents and riders, such as ADA Paratransit certification, the reduced fare program, and the transit benefit program. Balanced with projected revenues, proposed expenses are supported by $36.3 million of RTA sales tax, a funding increase of 3.0% from the 2022 budget. Next slide, please. Our transit systems operations continue to rely on the $3.5 billion of much-needed federal relief funding provided to offset the ongoing ridership and fare revenue losses caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. By the end of 2022, the service boards and the RTA are expected to have drawn down about 47% of the available relief funding. The proposed 2023 regional budget and 2024-2025 financial plan anticipates the utilization of almost all of the remaining federal relief funding to support projected expense levels. Depending on RTA sales tax performance, relief funding will begin to exhaust in late 2025, with only a small amount expected to remain for 2026, just over the horizon of this year's budget and financial plan timeframe. As emphasized during the development of the RTA strategic plan, new revenue sources must be identified and implemented prior to the exhaustion of the federal relief funding to address a potential annual budget gap of more than $700 million, which is expected to begin in 2026. Next slide, please. Recovery ratio relief has been granted by the state through the 2023 budget year. Earlier this year, the board lowered each of the service board's recovery ratio requirements to reflect that relief. And the service board's 2023 budgeted recovery ratios meet or exceed the current RTA requirement by including federal relief funding as system-generated revenue. As a result, the regional recovery ratio for 2023 is budgeted at 45.8%, as allowed by the current relief. The 50% recovery ratio requirement is set to return after 2023. However, the projected revenue expense levels of the proposed service board two-year financial plans combine to less than 50% recovery in both 2024 and 2025. As a solution, RTA has temporarily included a nonspecific regional level revenue credit to reach the 50% requirement. In effect, we are self-disclosing that we cannot meet the 50% requirement in those years, even with federal relief funding included as revenue. This confirms the need for an extension of the current temporary recovery ratio relief, or better yet, permanent relief, or elimination of the recovery ratio requirement altogether, as recommended by the 10-year financial plan analysis within the draft strategic plan. At the bottom of the table, for information, we have also shown in red the recovery ratio with approved adjustments, but excluding the federal relief funding from the calculation. This gives us a better idea of where the regional recovery ratio really stands at around 25%. I'll now turn the presentation over to Brian Lowenberg for a summary of the proposed capital program. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Doug. I'm Brian Lowenberg, Manager of Capital Programs here. I'll provide a brief overview of the proposed capital program that's up for adoption, and then discuss some key projects that are funded within the program. Next slide, please. The 2023 to 2027 capital program contains $5.7 billion in funding. 72% of the funding comes from federal sources, which include both federal and discretionary funding. 20% comes from state funds that include PAYGO from the motor fuel tax, as well as state bonds. 8% comes from a combination of CTA and RTA bonds. Other local funding sources shown on the slide make up less than 1% of the available funds. Next slide, please. The funding split by service board is $3.5 billion for CTA, or 60% of the program, $1.9 billion for Metra, or 33% of the program, and $382 million for PACE, or 7% of the program. Next slide, please. We wanted to touch on some key projects included in the capital program in three important areas that the regional transit system is focused on addressing. Our first focus is providing a more equitable transit system. For CTA, equity projects include the Red Line extension, which is funded with $340 million and will fund design and engineering, and the bus slow zone eliminations project, which will provide improvements on Chicago Avenue, 79th Street, and Western Avenue, funded with $15 million. For Metra, equity priorities include the new Auburn Park Station, funded with $32 million, and the Harvey Transportation Center, which is a joint project between Metra and PACE to improve bus and rail facilities, funded with $21 million. For PACE, funded equity projects include the Pulse 95th Street line, which will provide faster bus service along the important corridor and funded with $21 million in the program, and the purchase of new paratransit vehicles funded with $19 million. Next slide, please. Our next focus is accessibility. CTA's accessibility projects include the All Stations Accessibility Program, which focuses on making stations fully vertically accessible around the system and is funded with $110 million in the program. Another project, the Brown Line Western Station reconstruction, brings this station up to ADA guidelines and is funded with $13 million in the program. Metra's accessibility enhancements include the purchase of new rail cars, which are fully wheelchair accessible and are funded with $274 million in the program, plus the Van Buren Street Station rehab, which will make this station fully ADA accessible and is funded with $16 million. Finally, PACE's accessibility project includes the purchase of community and on-demand vehicles that offer better ADA access and is funded with $5 million in the program. Next slide, please. Our final focus area is sustainable transit. CTA has programmed $144 million for the purchase of articulated electric buses and the associated charging equipment, as well as $115 million to electrify Chicago Garage. Metra is funding new technologies, including zero-emission locomotives at $36 million and zero-emission train sets at $20 million. And finally, PACE is proceeding with electrification of their services. There's a planned investment of $96 million at North Division Garage and $94 million at Southwest Division Garage. Let's move on to the next slide to wrap things up. So in conclusion, staff is recommending board adoption of the proposed 2023 operating budget, 2024 to 2025 financial plans, and 2023 to 2027 capital program as outlined in this presentation. The budget proposals and capital program that are detailed in the ordinance are balanced based on reasonable assumptions and meet all other RTA Act requirements for adoption. This concludes our presentation. Doug and I are happy to address any questions. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions? Director Gorman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Doug and Brian, for your presentations. In attending the hearing and then also in our meeting public comments, many people wrote in. Can you comment on the 500 diesel bus for CTA and their efforts towards electrification, just to kind of build on Director Carey's comments?
Yeah, I can comment a little bit on that. So obviously we see CTA has continued to their commitment to electrify by 2040. There's over $250 million in the current program. We just talked about a couple of those projects there. Both service boards, CTA and PACE, have significant infrastructure needs that will be in the billions to completely electrify the system, including garages and purchase of buses. But during that process, they'll have to continue operating the current service as well. So CTA's ongoing replacement of buses takes care of buses that are well past their useful life and are needed during the continual transition period, basically.
And then that makes sense because the infrastructure that has to be put in place before we can go towards, total electrification, makes total sense, towards our sustainable assets. But thank you for your comments.
Director Randolph.
Thank you, Director Gorman. I had a similar question. Now I wanted some clarification. So based on the aging fleet, these buses were pre-ordered to move transportation forward. That's what I'm understanding. And I think it was 300 buses that was pre-ordered?
So this order for buses, again, total of 500, began in 2020 with state PAYGO funding and is funded through sort of a 5-year program. CTA has made that commitment to transition by 2040. So all of the funding will be expended, all the buses in operation by 2026 so that they have their full useful life. But the funding that goes into this program kind of deals with the last 200 buses that remain to be purchased. As Violet mentioned, 300 are already ordered and the first 100 have already been delivered.
So based on need today, tomorrow, building out the infrastructure to support electric buses. So it's all in favor, it's all in mind. They are working towards that.
Correct. And this is replacing buses that are 20+ years old at this point.
Thank you for the clarification.
Director Carey.
I'm going to stay on the same subject, and I just want to acknowledge, I was on the public hearing and we've heard some comments today that we've heard impassioned pleas from residents and community leaders for us to move faster on electrification. I don't think there's anybody around this, table that wouldn't like to do that. So as we've explained today, 300 of the buses have already been ordered and some are actually on the street. If we could not order those other 200, that would be great. But, we proposed the same question to President Carter when he was here presenting the CTA budget. And he said, as has been explained here, that they have to be able to replace some of the buses that are on the street today, and that they won't be able to achieve electrification in time to avoid these purchases. So having said that, I intend to vote for the budget as it is. But I do look forward to, because one other thing President Carter also said is that they will not leave money on the table with the federal grants that has been explained that New York and some others have obtained more than we've asked for, than CTA has asked for so far. President Carter will not leave that on the table. He will go after that. It's not a one-time thing. So we'll hold him to that, and we'll hold CTA to meeting the 2040 schedule that they've presented to us. And I really do appreciate the comment from the community. Thank you.
Director Colson.
Yeah, well, I agree. I found the comments from Mr. Mainzer and the lady from Highland Park very helpful. And I'm glad that we talked about this issue. The useful life of a bus is what, 12 to 15 years? And so if we're going to hold them to their 2040 goal, which I think other transit agencies in the country have also adopted, this should be the last order of diesel buses ever for CTA. Is that?
That's correct, yes. CTA is committed to programming no funds.
Okay, and it's
after
other people
2026.
have said this, but I'm going to quote Dorval Carter again. The best thing we can do for the environment is to get people out of their cars and onto transit. And let's not lose sight of the forest for the trees.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments? Director Ross.
So mine is a procedural question. If the buses have already been purchased, why is the number 500 in this year's budget or capital program when it says 2023 to 2027?
The technical project name was purchase of 500 buses. So funding continues to complete that purchase, and that's just a project title. But the overall purchase was 500, so a portion has been completed.
Well, all I can say is to the general public, that's misleading, because that sounds to me that it's 500 new buses as of today, when, as you've indicated, more than 100 of them have already been delivered.
Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, it's a multi-year, a part of a multi-year program and process. When they put together the original grant application, which we're continuing to fund over multiple years, right? That's what you're seeing. They formally titled that grant 500 bus. So it's sort of it's a proper noun for the title of that grant. I know it does sound a bit misleading because it's not an additional 500. That 500 has been programmed in the rolling multi-year 5-year program for several years. So sorry for that, but it would mean we'd have to go back to Feds or Springfield. We'd have to, to just change the title on that technical detail. And so it's just the title of the grant, if that makes sense. Sorry.
Or at least footnote it for us so that we more clearly understand. I understand the
Point
technical
taken.
requirements, but
We'll make sure we flag that and note that as we kind of go forward in these conversations too.
thank you.
And we may be able to take the number out in the future or just say bus purchase.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it, Brian. Thank you. That's good. Director Ross, that's a good comment. Any other questions? I guess when President Carter was here on bus electrification, I think one of the things he asked for was to judge him like Tom Brady, the quarterback. Judge him when the full program is over in the fourth quarter at the end, not just initially. And, as I said earlier, President Carter has tremendous experience in Washington and will not leave money on the table in working with our congressional delegation, who is very adept at seeking federal funding. That's the it's one thing they do very, very well. Our delegation is to bring back transportation dollars. We're renowned in Washington for not leaving transportation money on the table in Washington, D.C., and that's a credit to our congressional delegation and their staffs. All right, how about a motion and a second to approve this as submitted? Director Holt moves, seconded by Director Pang, that we approve the ordinance in 7B. And Mr. Secretary, roll call, please.
Director Andalcio.
Aye.
Director Canty.
Aye.
Director Carey.
Aye.
Director Colson. Director Fuentes.
Aye.
Director Gavin.
Aye.
Director Gorman.
Aye.
Director Holt.
Aye.
Director Kotel.
Aye.
Director Pang.
Yes.
Director Ross. Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
12 ayes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And 7B is adopted, and gentlemen and all the staff and the service boards, thank you for, this is a multi-month process and culminated today. So thank you very much. I think we can address the following agenda items at the same time as they appear on the board agenda. And the items that are next include 7C, an ordinance authorizing a contract for the Kimball Station Area Curb Management and Mobility Plan. 7D, an ordinance authorizing a contract for Strategic Asset Management Support Services. 7E, an ordinance authorizing a contract for security and monitoring and maintenance services here at our RTA corporate office. 7F is an ordinance appointing Jeff Goodlow to the RTA Board of Pension Trustees, and 7H is the approval of travel reimbursements. Jill Leary is here if there's questions on 7C or 7D. Nadine is here on our security monitoring at the RTA office, and Bill Lackman, with respect to the pension trustee, is available. Questions on this, or can I have a motion in a second to adopt these? Yes. Yep. Great. Thanks. Director Andalcio moves, seconded by Director Canty, that we adopt those. All those in favor, Jeremy, is leave granted for the attendance roll call?
Leave.
Seeing no objection, leave is granted, and those items are approved.
12 ayes,
Now,
Mr. Chairman.
thank you. I want to come back to 7G, which is a resolution to honor Director Canty, as this is her last meeting as an RTA board member before she proudly joins the Illinois General Assembly, where she will not be rid of us. Let's put it that way. Or mass transit. I just want to say you've been an invaluable member of the board from the day you got here, and you've stayed, consistently engaged during this critical time for transit. You're a great advocate, and that's why you're the new state representative for your Northwest suburban Cook County area and the region as a whole. We'll miss you, but we'll see you as we do our former director, Senator Don DeWitt in Springfield. And in many ways, you'll become a more important advocate for mass transit in Springfield than you are, Mary Beth, sitting here on this board. So we wish you well. We're very proud of you. And you're a superstar. And as now a senior citizen in Illinois, I love to see young people come up through the process, because it makes me have faith that the state of Illinois, where I was born, raised, and lived and raised my family, is in good hands with people like you going to Springfield. So congratulations. Want to say anything?
I just want to thank everybody for allowing me to be part of this board, for embracing my questions and putting up with the fact that I don't always follow the rules exactly as they are written. But I am a big proponent of public transit and what it can do for our communities. So I intend to continue to advocate in Springfield and in our local communities. So I know I said that I wouldn't get a chance to say anything earlier, but I plan to say a lot of things about public transit in the state of Illinois, and continue to try and improve it. So thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you, and thank you so much, and good luck to you, and we'll see you in Springfield, so you're not going away. How about a motion to approve 7G? Director Ross moves, we approve it, seconded by Director Carey. All those in favor say aye. Aye, opposed nay, and the ayes have it, and you will have one more piece of paper, which is our resolution, thanking you for your service, Representative. I can call you Representative from now on instead of Director. Much better title. So congratulations, Mary Beth. Item 8 is new business. Any new business to come before the board? If not, I want to wish everybody a happy holidays and happy new year. It's been, I think another productive, good year, difficult year. Better times are ahead, but it's never easy to operate in this space during these still historic times, because COVID is still a factor and we have lots of challenges, as our strategic plan has pointed out. But and to our staff, thank you for making us look good, and for all of your deep thought and hard work day after day after day. You're the backbone that holds it all together. So, Leanne, on behalf of all of us, thank the staff, many of whom are sitting here behind you. You're the best, and we deeply appreciate everything that you do. If there's no further business to come before the public session of the Board of Directors, I'll entertain a motion and a second to adjourn. Director Colson moves we adjourn. Director Gaving seconds. And with that, all those in favor of adjourning say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.